Hello and welcome to the Cup of Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors oxygenaddict.com, fueledbycake.com and raceforce.co.uk. Helen, how's the weather with you today, my friend?
Evening, Rob. I feel it's a case of deja vu now. So when we started the Cup of Triathlon podcast, it was just under a year ago. We've not yet got to 1 year.
Hey, we're nearly there,
I
aren't
know,
we?
I know.
What we are now, is this like 44 or something?
Something like that, but I definitely remember it was December, and I talked a lot about commuting in the dark on a Monday night. It's returned.
We're back there, are we?
We are back there. Um, and yeah, it's that horrible bike commute on a Monday night. And funnily enough, though, today riding home was better than riding in. How does that work?
It was a beautiful day today, actually, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
In the northwest of England, I have to say. I don't know what it was like elsewhere, but it was a beautiful, very warm, sunny day today.
Yeah.
I managed to get a lovely little ride in this morning,
Oh,
run in this morning, first thing.
mega. Oh no,
Small
Rob's
coffee
still
fit,
ill. He's
sorry.
still ill.
No, I'm fighting fit, mate. I am good to go. This vegetarian diet is agreeing with me. I'm a new man.
Oh, brilliant. Last week it was the sniffles. This week we're going to have coughing to deal with. So,
Just had a little something in my throat. I was desperate to go for a ride this afternoon, though, I tell you. It must have been mid-20s where I was when I was walking to
mid-20s.
walking up. Honestly, it was t-shirt weather. I was really, really warm in the sun, and I was thinking, I really want to go for a ride. But I'd agreed to play guitar at Xander's preschool for the end of the day. So I was sitting there playing Twinkle Twinkle Little
Thinking,
Star on
get
the
me out of
guitar.
here.
Oh, it was awesome. I have to admit there was a slightly heavy tone to my step as I was wishing out on a bike ride, but the enthusiasm of 10 3-year-olds as they jump around as you play Johnny Be Good is something not to be missed, mate.
Oh, I love it.
Oh dear.
Well, you just talking then about the warmth. I was up in Northumberland this weekend near Hexham, and
Hexham.
yeah, I went for a little run along Hadrian's Wall. Not all of it, just a tiny little section of it.
It's the kind of thing I could see you doing, actually. Just a little run along Hadrian's
Yeah,
Wall.
no, I didn't. Just a little bit. Blooming heck, it was freezing up there.
It's always chilly in the
Oh
northeast, isn't it?
man, you sort of
That wind comes off the
oh
sea.
golly, it was really really cold when you sort of got to the actual wall bit, and suddenly it was very very exposed and in your face.
That'd have kept me out if I'd been a southerner trying to invade Scotland back in the
Yeah,
day.
exactly.
The cold would have kept me out, let alone a wall.
Get back south.
Uh,
Oh,
at least it wasn't foggy up there, though. I used to live in Whitby, and in the springtime when it starts to get warm, they have these things called a sea fret,
sea fret.
which is fret, F-R-E-T. Yeah, so it's like a really thick fog, like the kind of thing Sherlock Holmes experienced in London. And it can honestly be like really hot in Middlesbrough, just inland,
Yeah.
and you drive down to by the sea, and something to do with the temperature of the sea being colder than the land or whatever, thick blanket of fog making it feel about 6 or 7 degrees,
Ooh.
and you get that all the way through the springtime. So breaks your heart, man.
Oh God, no, that is cold. Just a slight aside here, Rob, but hey, we always like to learn something every day, don't we? In the French-speaking part of Canada, when they say it's cold, they say il fait fret. They use the word,
Is that
yeah,
right?
fret. So they don't say
Interesting.
froid, fret. So
Interesting. Bit of language instruction, there as well. Well done,
exactly,
Helen.
linking it in.
Like that.
Anyway, I'll shut up.
Well, I'll tell you what else links in here because we're talking about the warmth and we're talking about us nearly having been going for a year. And it totally boggled my mind today that Challenge Peguera was on this weekend,
It was.
which was your big race last year. And I was thinking, well, have they had two Challenge Pegueras in a year? That can't be right. Because I remember it so clearly. You going over there and doing this big race and it being the culmination of the season. And here we are
A
a whole
year
year
on.
later.
I know,
It's
I
nuts,
know.
isn't it?
It's really, really crazy. And I don't know where the year has gone, but I can't believe that it's a year ago. It's sort of a part of it feels like it was yesterday, running in that heat in Peguera, but no, a year ago. And I think it was pretty warm again. I heard various people say it was really, really tough, and it's a very lovely sea swim if the water's calm. And then the bike has got a few decent climbs in it, but it's not on a par with like a Wimble Ball or anything with some really, really tough climbs. But then the run is actually quite technical, and if it gets hot, it's on some quite narrow streets, and that you just sort of feel trapped in the heat. And there is a steady incline, and you've got some stairs to negotiate and a big ramp, so it really does sap your energy.
It's not a sort of rhythm running course. It's one for those real power runners, is
Yeah,
it?
yeah, but it's a really really good event, and it's nice. I mean, the swim is just stunning, and you go from the beach and you swim out and then into another bay, and then transition seemed to go on for miles last year, but then that could have been because it was the European Middle Distance Championships. This year it wasn't, but I know Race Force were out there again, weren't they, helping people out? Um,
Yeah, I saw a great video from Kate actually dragging some poor guy down the finishing chute who looks like he's just about on his last legs.
oh no.
Kate's got him by the wrist and pulling him along, one of her relay entrants, I think she says. But looks like they had a great old time racing up and down there in the lovely, lovely sunshine. And she posted a photograph of her working on her laptop earlier today, and you can see her laptop, her brown legs stretched out towards the sea, and then the blue sky and the sun shining. And I just thought, oh,
Yeah, nice.
not jealous at all.
No, no, not at all.
Jealous
Well,
at all.
Chris Flavel got in touch with us on Twitter. And he said, I died at Challenge Peguera on Saturday. Hashtag hard day at the office. And he said it was about 27 degrees, so the heat did have an impact. And he said he struggled with the run, but it was a great event and that he was well looked after by Kate.
Nice. I tell you what, to be able to go and get 27 degrees in
Not
mid-October,
bad, is it?
it's pretty
It's
nice.
a good end of season race, I think, especially if you want to tag a holiday onto the end of it, because Peguera is it's a holiday resort. Yeah,
Nice.
so it's a
So you
decent
get
one.
a lot of reasonable accommodation prices and things like that
Yeah,
there, do you, as
yeah,
well?
and especially if it's
Maybe.
outside of October half term, it's a decent bet.
Nice. Maybe next year, Hells.
I
We'll add it to the list.
oh
The
no.
famous list. All
Anyway,
right,
should we
let's
go
go
through the
through some
results?
finishes here. Yeah, go on. I'm going to let you announce the top three because they're just asking for your beautiful pronunciation skills.
Okay, well, in the men's race, first place was Philip Ospoli in a time of 4:03:26. It must have been a decent sprint finish because in second was Miguel Angel Fidalgo Rosello, who finished
Love
just
it.
under 20 seconds later. And then in third, we had Marcel Zamora Perez. So that was the top three pro men. We couldn't spot any. Oh, Horst Reichel was racing. He came
Yeah.
11th. And
Sergio in
yeah,
13th. Good old
Sergio
Sergio down to
Marquez in
13th.
13th. Then on the women's, in the women's race, I just have to find the women's race because it just seems to have disappeared a second. So let me go back and
There you
find.
go. I've got
You
it.
got it?
Oh, fear. Do. Oh, it's disappeared.
Okay, I'm going to find the women's race right now. It's loading up again. So in first place, no, it's totally disappeared.
There we got it. We've got, hang on, I'm going to give it a crack here. Sarah Munoz in first place in 4:37 flat. Maya Nielsen in 4:39 and Vereno Volta in 4:40. Now, a bit of British interest here for us, Hells. Catherine Jameson pulled out what's probably the race of her season, seventh place.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Nikki Bartlett in ninth place, who I think according to her Twitter feed, 14 minutes faster than last year, which is blooming impressive improvement in a year, isn't it?
And you know that was on the back of very, very little run training because she's had a bit of an injury over the past few weeks. So
Yeah.
that's really decent.
And good old Yvette Grice as well, finishing down as 10th pro. Good to see her at Race Mile. She's a former winner of Ironman UK. And the year she won it, she just destroyed everybody on the run. She's such a good runner.
Oh.
She's one of those really, like her form is just perfect, you know?
Kind of beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
Like,
I came out of transition just behind her in a half Ironman years ago and thought, oh, this is going to be awesome. There's Yvette Grice. And she just went,
bye.
disappeared like she was in a cartoon with the rocket boots on. I was like, okay, that told me.
Oh, well, that's good to see her back racing for sure.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, and then there was another British person racing as a pro for the first time, and it was Eloise Doulouart, and she, I don't think finished though. I think she got a DNF, so probably not the debut race that she was after, but I know she's sort of quite well. She's clearly it was her first pro race, so very new
What's her background, do you know?
lacrosse player, very good lacrosse player, and has only got into
Wow.
triathlon in the last couple of years.
So you'd better hope that she's not dropping bottles at the feed station, right?
Yeah.
She'll be able to scoop them up as she goes by.
Exactly. So yeah, she definitely though raced at the 70.3 World Champs in Austria, and I think got a top 10 finish in her age group. So she is a very decent athlete,
Quality
and
athlete,
she's
yeah.
trained by Mark Pearce, who used to be with
Oh,
British Triathlon.
yeah, good knowledge. There we go. Now let's shoot all the way around the world and head down to Australia for the World Duathlon Championships. A bit of duathlon action, Hells.
Yeah, love it.
Looks like a bit of success as well over on the British side. We've got to take our hat off to the wonderful Emma Pallant, who took the gold medal, took it to the Australians on their own patch,
Fantastic.
took it out in 1:58 from, oh, here we go, Ai Ueda from
She's one of
Japan.
the ITU races. Sorry,
Yeah,
she does a lot of the ITU races. Ueda. Yep.
no good knowledge. And Sandra Levenes from France. So it looks like she had a pretty solid win there, 30 seconds clear at the finish line, which is very tasty indeed.
That's
Over
fantastic,
on the
and just
men's
shows
side,
her running, doesn't it?
yeah,
I mean, she's come
yeah,
from the run background, so it must be really good to actually all that hard work with Michelle Dillon and Stuart Hayes as well is sort of paying off. So yeah, brilliant. And then,
yeah.
as you're saying on the men's side, fantastic third for Mark Buckingham in 1:48. He finished behind Benoit Nicolas of France in second, and Emilio Martin of Spain, who won it in 1:47.11.
Fantastic. I read a tweet from Bucko that said what did he say happened? Did he get drilled on the third run? Is that what happened?
Don't know.
He said he had a really good first run, rode along in the bike. I can't remember. Damn it. I did my prep and I've forgotten, Helen. My memory's not what it used to be.
Oh no.
Come on, Bucko, drop us a tweet and tell us.
He said what he did say was that he's having 3 weeks off and he's going to have some time in a boot and to sort of help sort out his Achilles.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So he said, okay, he was third, odd race, mega on the first run, got attacked the whole bike, cramped off the bike. Thanks for the
There you
support.
go.
Season done. And then a little image of a pint of beer.
Oh, that's all right for some, eh?
Yeah, nice.
Hope you get that Achilles sorted out, Mark. Don't lose hope, my friend. It can get turned round. I'll send you the number of my physio. He'll have a look at you.
There was another.
And that's not all the results, is it?
No. In the elite juniors, the former Youth Olympic Games champion, he's a British guy, one again very much to look out for. So Ben Dijkstra, he won in 53.12. And again, he must have pulled away just before the finish line because he beat the Aussie pair of Luke Willian, who finished in 53.24, and Daniel Canala in 53.32. So that must have been a really, really close finish for the
I tell you
elite
what,
juniors.
mate. Youth gold, the Youth Olympics. We should be marking the page right here with young Ben.
Very much so.
Because people are talking about him in the coaching circles as being very much the real deal for the future. If he can keep himself strong and stay injury free with that natural speed, that's just great way to look forward to the future, isn't it?
Definitely.
And you've got to wonder even if there's the sniff of him getting blooded in at Rio next
I don't
year.
think there will be.
You got to wonder.
Nah, I don't think they'd.
You don't think
No.
so?
No.
You're sure of this, Helen. You know your strategy. Well, your fantasy Olympic team is nailed in, isn't it? Having
Not yet, but I don't think they would. I think they'd go with someone who has more experience. And remember, he's racing at the elite junior. He's not. It's not even under 23.
Well, don't forget they did it with Alistair Brownlee. He was really young when he went out to Athens, wasn't he?
Did
He
he?
was still a young whippet back then, yeah. He was like 20 at Athens.
Yeah, but he's not. He's a couple of years younger.
Oh, I just love the
Sorry,
idea
I'm
of.
like, no, I don't think he will.
No, yeah,
No.
come on, play long, play long, play long. Don't think he's gonna. All right, fair enough. You're probably right. They'll probably take Phil Graves. Like, 2 seats on the plane for Graves's quads.
Oh.
Oh boy. All right. Nice one. Right. What are we on to
We
next?
need to mention a few age group results from Adelaide, Rob.
We do. Of course we do.
Definitely.
Go on.
Well, the one and
First
only
up.
Jill Fullen won her age group. She's amazing. So she's
The Fullinator.
added. She has added World Championship Duathlon Gold to her. She won her age group, didn't she, at the 70.3 World? She dominated her age group at 70.3 Staffordshire. She's just a machine. So fantastic to have done so well in Austria and then kept it going, kept the motivation up to take gold again in Australia.
Oh, great season for her. Well done, Jill. We also had gold for Elspeth Knott in the 65 plus, Claire Steels in the 25 plus, Carl Avery in 25 plus, Paul Abeldo in the 45 plus, Andrea Sanders Rees in the 60 plus, and Maurice Young in the 80 plus. That's a great name for an 80-year-old athlete, isn't it?
Oh.
80 years young for Maurice there. Well done, guys. That's some seriously good results there. There's a long way to travel around the world, isn't it, to Adelaide, unless you think you've got a serious shot of a podium.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same next year, isn't it? With the 70.3s, they're going to be Sunshine Coast, aren't they? They're going to be over down in Australia. So, it is a long way to go, and you wonder how. I don't know. Will many of the European 70.3 races roll down quite a lot?
Yeah, I imagine. Usually it'll happen if you want to go to the 70.3 Worlds and you're on the cusp of it, then next year's the year for you, because I imagine a lot of the slots will roll.
So if you've wanted that, lifelong dream of going to Australia and it's never quite happened, give it a go next year.
Why not roll it in with a race there? What time of year are they being held? Do you know?
No, I don't, but I might find.
You'd imagine
out.
it'll be.
I'll come back to you on that one.
It must be late in the season, wouldn't you?
Late in the season for us, yeah.
Late in our season and probably early in the
yeah.
Australian season.
Yeah, I'm gonna find out.
Yeah, good stuff.
September 2016.
Oh, there you go.
Mooloolaba.
Interesting, Mooloolaba. Have you ever been there?
No. Sorry.
You have to get out to Australia at some point.
I have to figure out where. But hold on, but I've Noosa. Is it there? I think I've been near there. Yes, it is. I have been very near there. So therefore, yes, I have been to Sunshine Coast. Clearly, I had had a few too many beers on the Sunshine Coast.
Back in your pre-exercise days, clearly blocked it all out. Hell's what goes on the Sunshine Coast
stays on the Sunshine Coast. Exactly. So there we go. Yeah, let's moving on, Rob.
Moving on. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We will jump into our interview of the week. We've got a corker lined up this week. We have got an interview with a gentleman called Hywel Davies. Some of you will be familiar with Hywel, with his nickname of Hywel Towel. He's been on I Am Talk a couple of times, and I've known Hywel for many, many years through the triathlon forums and known him at races. Some of his greatest achievements include, outside of qualifying for Kona, he was the Ironman UK double Ironman champion. He was second at the Outlaw. He's got an Ironman PB of 8:44. He was European middle distance champion. As well as this, Hells, he has been the world record holder for the marathon on the indoor Concept 2 rower,
so
if you can believe that.
He's a pretty rubbish athlete then, really.
World record holder for the 100-kilometer
Yeah,
row.
absolutely rubbish.
Bearing in mind that time is roughly equivalent on a rower and running, that's a long time to be in a rowing machine for.
That's amazing. So what
He
you'd be
was,
talking? Oh goodness,
yeah, like a long time,
like 13
like
hours. So
10 times 40 minutes probably, something absolutely
that's
crazy.
wow.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what the time is actually. I'll tell you what I'm going to do at the end of this. I'm going to forward you a link to his race report from that because it's mind blowing. He was a multiple gym champion in kind of CrossFit type events back in the days before CrossFit was even a branded phrase. And now at the ripe old age of 41, he's made the decision to leave his teaching career and start racing as a pro triathlete. He is,
Wow.
yeah, he
So
is.
he was doing all of that whilst working full time as a teacher.
He was doing all of that while working full time as a teacher. Now, he's not turning pro in the sense of it's been my lifelong dream and I think I can go and win stuff. He's racing pro because he wants to sort of step up into the profession of triathlon coaching. And he knows that racing pro is going to give him the chance to go and race loads more races all around the world. And he's pretty honest in his interview and he says, I reckon I'll be able to finish in the top 10 in most events and maybe a bit higher if I have my best day. But obviously, for a guy like him who's the right standard, it's a lot more cost effective to go and do loads of races if you're racing as a pro. And what a brilliant story for those of us who are harbouring the ideas of doing something brilliant into our 40s to turn pro after you've turned 40, hey?
That is super inspiring. That's brilliant.
So here we go. Yeah,
Can
let's
I
hand
just,
us over
before
to
we
the
go
interview.
to the interview, Rob,
You can.
I can tell you that the finish time for the rowing for 100 kilometres, well, the provisional finish time, which I found, was 6 hours, 37 minutes, and 56.9 seconds. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I don't think you even want to start doing the maths of how fast that is on a. It's like 140 per 100 or something stupid like that.
Wow.
Or per 250. Yeah, it's
I'm going
nuts.
to let
I
you
remember the time
introduce him.
thinking, I can't row a kilometre at that pace.
No.
Literally crazy stuff. All right, mate, here we go. I'll hand you over to our interview. Okay, so we're joined here by the wonderful Hywel Davies. Hywel, it's great to finally manage to get you on the show. We've been trying to hook this interview up for ages, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm a man in demand. I think this is the only Try podcast I'm yet to do. So, yeah, great to be on board.
It's good to finally get you on and chat, mate. So, listen, for listeners who haven't heard about you much or sort of new to the scene, let's go back over your history as an athlete and talk a little bit about the things you've done in the past. Because obviously, you've ended up coming to Ironman from a fairly unique sporting background, haven't you? Really?
Yeah, kind of a mixed bag of everything, really. And university days were really go and try everything, and that ranged from powerlifting to playing ultimate frisbee to endurance running, and then joined every club I could find, and eventually ended up just doing my own thing, really, with what is now probably the evolution into CrossFit, doing what was called cross training, which is really just a gym circuit or gym decathlon. And through that, I'd always supplement that with running, cycling, indoor rowing, weight training. But that became then my main focus for competing, because let's be honest about it, the prizes were great, and there were holidays all around the world. There was cash prizes, sometimes bikes, but the holidays were fantastic. So that was something I stuck with for a few years. But when you're doing things like that, you're always looking for different challenges, and one of those was things like obstacle racing and the original tough guy race. And because I did quite well at that, I got opportunities to do some adventure racing, and that took me around the world, through New Zealand, the States, out to Sweden and Austria, and they were just fantastic, just such good challenging experiences. But they were 3, 4, 5 day races. So when you get that sort of belief of, well, that's a long race doing 5 days, what I'd ended up doing through the cross training stuff was made some good links with the triathletes of the day, some of them still competing. So people like Richie Hobson, Glenn Cook, Robin Brew, they became good mates and always said, well, go and try a triathlon. I thought, well, you know what? I don't think I can because I can't swim. But
This is great because it's like there's so many people listening to this who are from the same background, and you meet so many people, don't you, who say, "Oh yeah, I love biking and running, but I just can't swim." And I think your story is great in that you really did genuinely start out as somebody who couldn't swim, didn't you?
yeah, well, you're coming from races where you are on your feet for 8, 9 hours, or you're cycling for 12 hours, and then an Ironman at around 5 and a marathon at around 3.5 to 4 didn't seem that daunting, but the swim just absolutely scared the life out of me. I thought there's no way. The longest race I did was 50 meters in a pool, and I needed CPR after that. And I remember just going into a pool and trying to see if I could swim more than 2 lengths, and it was a complete failure. But I got coerced into trying a triathlon, and my first one was always going to be the biggest distance, and I wanted to find the flattest and easiest one around. So I opted for Almere in Holland in year 2000, and my training for that was it's quite funny that I used one of the holidays that I had from the cross training, which was out in St. Lucia, to say, well, I've got the sea. I've just bought a custom-made wetsuit. I'm going to get in the sea and learn to swim within 2 weeks.
Good man.
So I was just out swimming every day and started swimming across the bay, and then there's a big rock out in the distance which looked about a kilometre away, and I had canoe support with a mate and thought, well, I'll swim that, get round there and back. And it was awesome, and I really did enjoy it. And I thought, salt water, clear water, look at all the fishes, take your snorkel out, and this was bliss. I thought, well, Ironman's going to absolutely be a walk in the park. I can get through the swim, and then the race is over for me because the bike and run will be a formality. So then, fast forward to September, and going to Almere in Holland, looking at the swim, which was black water. It was choppy, it was misty, you couldn't see more than about 50 meters ahead.
It's
And
pretty industrial, isn't it, Almere? It's a pretty imposing sort of swim venue.
it is. It's a mixture between diesel and chili sauce. And then you've got 500 other people around you. And I don't remember feeling confident, but I don't remember feeling scared by it until I put my face in the water. And then it was, why the hell am I doing this? And that was probably one of the lowest points of my whole sporting career, that I just stood up and thought, I can't do this. And did a few strokes in the water, put my face in, and then a canoeist came over to me and in best English asked me what the problem was, and I just said, I'm absolutely scared. I just cannot do this, and held on to the boat and thought, you know what, I've done all this training, I've come all this way, and at least I'll give it a go. So I just started swimming breaststroke and started going backwards. And I thought, this is pathetic. So try it again, and it took 3 panicked attempts to actually get swimming. And after about 20 minutes, I actually started to enjoy it because I could see a little bit in the water. I could see my shoulder, and that was enough. And I managed to get through it, and the relief of getting out the water was just fantastic. And on the bike, got through the bike. I blew a little bit around 80, 90 miles, but that didn't matter. That was what mountain biking on 12-hour shifts was like. And then the same with the run. It was a little bit of a run walk and stop for food and totally inexperienced of what I was doing. But I got round it in quite a respectable 10:28 for a first Ironman. So I was pretty chuffed for that and thought, well, I've got to crack this open water swim problem and go back and do it again. So I went back the following year as my second Ironman. I'd done a few sprint races in between, nothing open water. And pretty much the same result, just completely panicked in the water, questioned why I was doing it, hang on to a boat and wanted to give up. But I did go 45 minutes quicker and ended up with I think it was a 9:44.
Wow,
So
that's a real big jump in 1 year,
so
isn't
I was
it?
pretty much hooked on it, and that was kind of the challenging distance to do, and no other triathlon distance really excited me until our rugby tri group. I think it was that year we went down to Longleat for the 70.3, and
Oh yeah, that would have been when was that? 2005 maybe, sometime around then.
yeah, 2000, about 2004, 2005. But that was this probably the fourth open water swim I did, because I went to Almere again, and I went 2000, 2001, 2003. But then I did Longleat, and I just remember that swim being the worst of ever. And because the Almere swims are quite a long way out, turn around, come back, this was a whole new experience of a turn about 500 meters into the race. And I gave it such a wide berth after the first panic, and that was just horrendous again. And eventually got out, got to the bike, and about 5 miles in, had a blowout on the bike, tyre ripped open, and that was race over. So I did another 70.3 in excuse me, in Antwerp, and exactly the same thing. I did a reasonable swim, didn't panic too much because at least it was a bit lighter. It was 11 o'clock start, and then hit a pothole on the bike and double blowout again with damaged disc wheel, and I just thought I was cursed with 70.3, so I'd never do it again and just stick to Ironman. So since then, really, I've just been going mainly long distance races. I've experienced some of the big ones of Austria, done the UK Ironman a few times, and being out to Kona. So yeah, quite a long history of Ironman racing. I think it's 19 I've completed, if you include a double as being 2.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to that in a little while, I think, because that's another great story in itself. But I think the thing that's dead interesting here is that you have almost had this repeated problem or this repeated challenge, haven't you, of getting into cold, dark, murky water. And I think this is something that an awful lot of people are going to relate to, and that's really why I wanted to get you on, because it's one thing swimming in a pool and it's another thing swimming in St. Lucia. But when you get yourself into a traditional British kind of, they do tend to be dark, murky type waters, don't they, in a lot of the races. What sort of things have you managed to come up with that have helped you get through it then? Because I know you've had some absolutely storming swims in some of your races as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of what makes it strange, is that my first ever open water swim Ironman, I think, was 118, and now I swim around 55. So it's not that I'm bad. I'm not a back of the pack swimmer, and some of the local middle distance Olympic races I'll do open water, I could end up finding myself in the lead. So it's not that I'm an incapable swimmer, but it took me a long time to find out exactly what causes the panic attacks, because it could be dark water, it could be cold water, it could be low light, it could be choppy water, it could be other people. And individually, you put yourself in those situations and it doesn't bring it on. And sometimes a combination of those brings it on, and sometimes none of the above bring it on. And I've been out in the middle of Lake Annecy, which is probably the flattest, calmest, cleanest lake in the world to swim in. No other person there, and completely still water. And I've just lost it and just gone into a panic and started swimming breaststroke and turned on my back and thought, why am I doing this? So
it's amazing, isn't it, how the two thoughts can kind of exist in your head at the same time. The one voice saying, I'm completely freaking out, and the other voice saying, what's going on? You can handle this kind of thing.
Yeah, and you put all of the things together, and you take, for example, the national relays, which is my definition of hell. That if you end up starting in the national relays with 500-600 people around you all swimming flat out for 400 meters, that is every single ingredient to bring on the worst panic attack possible. But then I've done that race 4 or 5 times and never had one there. And
it's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, and it seems that I have less in Ironman racing than I do in shorter distances. And it's not that the field is any more spread out or different, because they always come in within the first 5 minutes of a race. And I used to think it was acclimatization to the water, so I could get in and I'd warm up and spend 10 minutes and do some sprint starts. But even then, they'd still come on, and I've had races where I've just dived straight into the water and had absolutely nothing, been completely in control all the way through. The only thing,
What have you found at the times when you're having these panic attacks? What have you found that's worked for you? I'm thinking what advice we could pass on to people that sort of helps, because, you know, all the time I'm always reading your reports and you always kind of get it together and end up swimming, you know, usually end up swimming really well, having had this kind of period of a few minutes where it just wasn't happening at all. So what kind of tips have you pulled out that can actually get you through it?
well, the main things that I do now are, I think the main contributing factor that I've had is the lack of sighting. And even though you know where you're going and you know you've only got to follow people, something subconsciously says to me, if you can't see what you're aiming for, then you're going to miss a stroke, you're going to miss a sighting, and you start to panic. So the first thing I do is make sure I can see exactly where I'm going and what other landmarks are around. So if I can't see the marker buoy, what else can I see? Is there a building in the background? Is there a tree? Or is there something on the banking I can still aim for? So sometimes in a sea swim, you might be in a peak when the marker buoy's in a trough and you can't see it, and vice versa. So as long as I can see something to aim for, that has really helped. And if I can walk the swim course, which is possible for some event venues, then at least you get some idea of where you're heading. And what I have found is where I've returned to races, that I'm unlikely to get a panic attack if it's a race I've done before.
So it's almost like a familiarity with a place really helps with that.
Yeah, and even if the water's choppy and there's other people around and it's dark and it's cold, if I know the area, if I know that I know exactly where I'm going, I know the direction of the swim, and I know where the turns are, that does seem to lessen it. The other thing is the start, because I think anyone who does a swim start will want to try and get themselves in the best position possible if they're being competitive. But the payoff with that really is that you've got to swim flat out for a period of time, and you're going to go into oxygen debt and hyperventilate, and that's something that can bring it on for me. So what I do try to do in a swim start is stay as far left as I can at the start, so I can see anyone around me rather than not see them, because I do only breathe to one side. And I know, you don't need to tell me, and we'll come on to that later on, but I only breathe to one side, and by choice I can do the other one, but when you're surviving for your life, is what it feels like, I just keep to the one side. So I go as far left as I can and try and swim as close to the marker buoy as I can, so I know that no one's going to be on my left and come out of nowhere. But once I get through that first 5 minutes, I'm absolutely fine. Then I can draft behind people, I can swim through gaps, I can change the pace, and it all seems to come right. So
good stuff.
I think I just need a rolling start for a swim.
Well, it looks like there'll be a few of those on the agenda for the next couple of years, mate, the way the Ironman events are going. I was looking over your sort of best race results, in inverted commas, and there's been some crackers, but one that really stands out is the 8:44 that you did at Roth. And when you think you started out as like a high 10-hour type triathlete with a 1:18 swim, to go significantly sub 9, pretty blooming outstanding performance. What do you think you can attribute the fact you got so much quicker over the years to?
The biggest contributing factor, I know this is going to sound very unorthodox, and I'm not going to recommend it to anyone listening to this, is that in 2002 I broke my leg. I broke my right leg doing an adventure type race, and the rehabilitation from that was just all cycling, because I sold my car and went for about 6-7 months doing nothing but cycling, and that took me from a 23-minute club time trial rider down to riding 20 minutes, and within 2 seasons I was down to 50 minutes for 25, and that was the big jump. And especially on the cycling, just because of the mindset of becoming a time trialer and doing a lot more cycle events, road racing, mixing that up a bit. But it became a bit more of a confidence thing that, yeah, I can ride 100 miles in under 4 hours, so I can get around about the 420, 430 mark on the bike. And that was the big jump, really. And I know we're talking 7 years afterwards, but the seed had sown that I'd become a better cyclist for breaking my leg. And then when the running came back about a year later, that didn't really change compared to where I was. So cycling was the biggest improvement. Swimming just slowly progressed every year, and I think just working a little bit with different swim coaches, having the one-to-one analysis worked really well. Changing the wetsuit, and that jumped me from a 105 swimmer down to a 55, 56.
Yeah, that was a big event for you, wasn't it? When you swapped over to Blue 70, am I right?
Yeah, it
I remember
was.
you writing about it at the time, and how you'd had this. I'm sure it's not all down to just the wetsuit, but it was kind of a revelation for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was swimming in a custom-made wetsuit, and it was okay. It was a first wetsuit. I don't know whether it was designed properly for my swimming stroke, but when I then went to a Blue 70 suit, it just seemed to fit much better than a custom-made one. And the first race I did in that one was the second of the Ironman UKs, and I came out in 55 minutes. And whatever we think about the course, whether it was short or not, but I backed that up in Austria the following year with exactly the same time, and a 56 in that Roth race. So it was consistently there or thereabouts, and times in the pool were improving as well. So it wasn't just down to the suit. I was putting the
Mm.
hours in the pool. But what I'd never done in Ironman, I still haven't, is nailed all three of my best things together. So I still haven't hit the sub-hour swim in the same race as what I'd say is a reasonable bike, so under 4:45, and a sub-3 run. And Roth was as close as I ever got to that, but there were some issues on the run.
Involving short stops and removal
Involving,
of the tricep.
yeah, there were trees around, and there was an opportunity, and it was quick.
We'll say no more, shall we, about that one? Now, the next thing to talk about, one of the real interesting things I've always found about you is the way you seem to sort of cycle your training over different periods of the year, and you'll go for periods without riding your bike, but you do loads of rowing indoors. You go for periods where you do loads of running. Do you find that it works for you to kind of take some time off from one event completely and then train really hard on something else, and that seems to bring you through plateaus year after year?
I think it's very easy to fall into a trap of saying your training intensity has to change through the year, but as long as your cardiovascular training is consistent through the year, it doesn't really matter what you do it with. And for me, cycling through the winter is dull, and unless it's on a turbo where there's some virtual reality racing or you've got regular groups to go out with, it's quite dull going out on your own in the cold and wet and rain for hours on end. But I find that rowing is something that I get more benefit from than just doing junk miles on the bike. So in a 45-minute to an hour rowing session, and I race online, and I sometimes race different events, and long endurance rows there, I'm working much harder than I would on a turbo or out on the bike. And again, it's something I'll cycle through 3 or 4 months of the year and then leave that, go back to running. Running is always something I'll do through the year, but it picks up if I'm training for a specific event like a marathon, that then the mileage goes up and it becomes 6, 7 runs a week rather than 3 or 4. But the key thing is you have something which is making you train hard, so high intensity interval work, and something that's cardiovascular demanding for you as well. But if you're a single sport cyclist, then yeah, you do need to back off something and take a break from the intensity. But for people who are doing 4 or 5 different sports at the same time, then it's almost like having two candles burning at once. As long as two are burning, it doesn't really matter which candles there are. So one
Yeah,
can,
and you completely avoid that mental burnout of thinking, "Oh God, not another sort of interval session on the bike or on the treadmill or
no,
whatever." It
exactly, because
just keep you really fresh mentally.
I don't tend to do a lot of high mileage in the summer running, and I do a lot more cycle mileage in the summer, and I don't tend to row in the summer because I row in a garage and it gets a bit too hot. But yeah, through the winter when it's dark, I'm quite happy with the row machine. Quite happy running at night and doing my mileage through the winter when it's you just need to keep going to keep warm. But
Yeah,
swimming this year especially is something I'm trying to keep going much more year round, because I've always used the excuse that if I'm rowing and I'm breathing at a pattern and I'm using heart and lungs a lot, when I get back into the pool, my swimming's actually okay and it doesn't deteriorate too much. But I've stepped that up a little bit for this year, so I need to keep that going.
hmm. Now, obviously, the big news here is that you've decided to step up for next year, and actually you've got your pro license, and you're going to have a crack at racing pro next year, which I'm sure has raised a few eyebrows for a gentleman who's turned 40 already. I think it's absolutely brilliant, mate. And do you want to talk us through the decision process for that?
Well, it's kind of financially driven, really, to say, yeah, I do want to do a few more Ironman races, and I do want to do some of the big city ones, the big events. There's ones I still want to do. I want to go over to the States and do an Ironman. Apart from Kona, I've never raced in a triathlon in the States. I'd like to go and do Germany. I'd like to go back to Barcelona. I might do Austria again. But the problem is that unless you're finger on a button on entry day, you're not going to get in unless you're prepared to pay a lot of money to do so. And they are expensive races, and they are a big commitment. And you're talking best part of £1,000 on entry, accommodation, and travel to get to them. But with the pro membership, if you can enter them with one price, then I think it's a no-brainer. And you've just got to be able to demonstrate that you're at that level. Now, my problem is that I've not raced an Ironman for I think 4 years now. I think Outlaw was the last one I did in 2011. So I needed to get some results this year. So I went back to racing and did a few middle distance races, but coming off the back of a couple of years of just a run focus, I've certainly, excuse me, certainly got myself in a position where if I can repeat and get lower on the swim down to the 52, 53 mark, I know I can get the bike form back with a combination of rowing and, of course, getting out cycling. But the hardest part of it all is the running, and that's stepped up quite significantly in the last year. But I look at the Ironman times as an overall entity, not just where I'm at the swim, because I'm under no illusion that racing a pro field, if it's separate, I'll be last pro out the water. But looking at the
Hey, at
times,
least you might get some clear water at the start,
exactly,
man.
that's the benefit, isn't
It
it?
might play into your place your
Yeah,
strengths
and you get a
there.
head start too. So
Yeah.
so
Getting some feet as they come by you.
but I think I can make up more, if not double that any time I'd lose on the swim on the run. And what's happened in the last year really is a transition, just not from just being someone who can run off the bike, but someone who can run as fast off the bike as they run normally, and that's a combination of different training and looking at the health side of things, the physio treatment I've had that has just put me in a completely different place now, running both before and on after a bike ride. That means at the end of a race I'll be competitive. I might not be competitive until the last 10 miles of a marathon, but certainly if I'm in the mix at that point, I'll keep going at that pace rather than blowing up like the others. So
Yeah.
I'm only aiming to get around about the 8:30, 8:40 mark, and looking at the dilution of Ironman races around the world now, is that's going to put me in the top 10 at most races.
Yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it? And you mentioned there you've been working with a really good physio recently, and obviously as athletes over 40, one of the big challenges to keeping going is not so much the desire to do the training, it's keeping our bodies held together to actually be able to complete the training we want to pain free. Talk to us a little bit about the physio treatments you've been having recently.
Um, yeah, well, one of the issues I had was that I had a back problem in 2011. That was the last proper big race I did well, which was the European long distance champs in Finland, and I had a back spasm after that was caused by a number of different things. But to cut a long story short, some of my vertebrae had moved and put stress on an area of muscle that just wouldn't allow me to lie on the floor and put my arms under my stomach, let alone lift and get any movement in my back. So riding a bike became very difficult. And I just remember that year turning up to the Vitruvian triathlon, and it's one of the only races I've ever pulled out of just because I got off the bike and just couldn't run. And I did Alpe d'Huez the following year, same thing, swim okay, bike was okay, and then just got off the bike and couldn't run at all, just couldn't stand up. Couldn't get up vertical to just run at any speed at all, so I ended up walking most of the course. And that was it then. I thought, well, I'm going to take time out and get that sorted. And I went back to rowing for a bit, and through the rowing fitness, I started running a little bit and eventually got the back problem sorted with a physio I'd used before, which was just emergency based, really. So every time I had a problem, I go and see a physio, which is the worst possible thing you can do.
Yeah,
But
and it describes almost perfectly the way 99% of us do things.
it does, and it's a shame that you know you say you know better, but you don't, and until you actually know that you've got to go to a physio every couple of weeks to keep yourself injury free, you refuse to believe that it works. So
Yeah, absolutely.
without triathlon, I concentrated on marathon running, but every time I'd up the mileage or change a train to just get a little bit of jumping speed, I'd get an injury. So if I was doing 3 or 4 weeks of track work, on week 4 I'd get something wrong and I'd break down. So I'd start building up again, think, well, I'll just do treadmill work, and then you just push the speed button a little bit further and something breaks down, as either calf tears or hamstring pulls or something. But this was just going around in circles, and I did London Marathon last year and pulled out at mile 10 with a hamstring tear. That just made me think, well, I've really got to get this sorted. It wasn't until January of this year that I found a physio that could really help me out, and everything that we discussed really was coming from problems in the spine and an imbalance in impact force on the ground. I was hitting the ground with my left foot a little harder than the right, and when we analysed it, it was something in the back. It wasn't a case of one leg shorter than the other, but it was one leg working less than the other because of problems further up in the spine. And we slowly started working on that, and since January then, no matter what I did to change the training and everything I had done before, so let's say it was cross country, downhill running, track work, and high mileage weeks, treadmill intervals, whatever, nothing would break it down. I was excuse me, coping with all the training okay, and then you get momentum in training and you get consistency, and all of a sudden times start coming down and form starts improving, and you make huge gains in your running. And ever since I've been just pushing that a little bit further, I'm getting the response without the injury, and since I've been back in triathlon now, that I'm finding I get off the bike and I don't have the jelly legs, I don't have the stiff back. I can get off and run as if I hadn't been on the bike at all. So that's been a complete revelation. I've always run and felt a little bit tired off the bike, and you slow down a little bit, but the 3 big races I've done this year, just straight off the bike, I'm running almost at my half marathon pace as if I wasn't on the bike at all.
That's amazing. It's a real, I mean, everybody knows this, don't they? Everybody knows that if they went to see a physio regularly and got regular treatment and got everything balanced out, things would be better in the long term. But I think at the extremes of performance, we see sometimes extremes of response to lots of things. And I think you're obviously a high responder to training, but you're also a high responder to physiotherapy. I just wonder how many other people out there would experience the same thing if we've prioritized spending a little bit more money on physio treatments and a little bit less money on race wheels and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was getting the proper analysis done to say where these injuries coming from, and it wasn't just a case of, well, you're training too hard, but when you realise that there is a discrepancy somewhere, and you're hitting the ground with 7 to 10% more force on one side than the other, then something's not right. And a combination of sort of strength and conditioning work, and I do run with a heel raise in my right foot to level things out, and we've looked extensively at wear patterns of trainers, and this was great. This was really enlightening to have a pair of trainers that I use for one marathon and put over 2,000 miles on them, and then as soon as I started the treatment with the current physio, started a new pair of trainers, and the wear pattern on the shoes is completely different. And it just tells a story of how my running's really evolved over the last 12 months. It's quite enlightening to see where the problem was and why I was getting injured just from the foot pattern.
Yeah. And that's all going to help, isn't it, in the big quest? Because I know part of your plan is you headed back to London in April in the quest to go under 2 hours 30, which is an amazing run time by any standards. But for somebody who considers themselves primarily to be a triathlete, a multi-sport athlete. Now, the thing I found really interesting, mate, was when I was reading your blogs, there's a conventional wisdom about how much you should slow down, in inverted commas, from your half marathon pace to run a marathon. And with most people, if you look at those predicted times, the predicted marathon time that gets given out to you is much faster than people can actually do based on the half marathon time. But you're one of the only people who had a sort of half marathon split. I mean, it wasn't much slower, was it, than your actual open half marathon at the halfway point of that race? What were the splits like in that?
Well, the funny thing is, if you take my marathon time, it should convert down to, it's almost like a 15:10 5K. And
Is it really?
There's no way I can run that fast. And my strength really is the fact that whatever pace I go at, I just go at for a long time. And I've always been completely useless at sprinting anything. And even when I get in the pool, the size and shapes of people who can overtake me as I'm doing my 1K time trials or 2K time trials, and I'm flat out, and they're just doing 1 or 2 lengths. But yeah, sprinting just doesn't work for me at all. But my half marathon PB was, I did it in Coventry on it's a relatively fast course, but even then I'm running very, very close to maximal for that distance, and I get to the end and think, could I do another couple of miles? And if I hadn't done a sprint finish, or my pathetic sprint finish, then I probably could have. And it's the same with Saturday morning park run. I get to the finish and think, you know what, I could probably go around again at that exact same pace. And that's what happened at London. The first 5K was 17:10, the second 5K was 17:10. Then we dropped to a 17:30, and just sticking with the pace of the group around me, we were chipping away at the 17s more or less through until about 35K, and then it just started to get a bit tired, and muscle fatigue kicked in, and I just slowed down a little bit too much than I wanted to. And it wasn't a blow up, but it was just a little bit off the pace. We dropped to 18. There's 2 18-minute 5Ks at the end, but I don't find taking it any easier, if that makes sense. To run a 1:14 rather than a 1:12 wouldn't have been that much easier, because I was just stuck with a pace in a group, and I did think I could carry that pace on for another for another half marathon. I wasn't far off, but since then, since doing a couple of more marathons since, there's a little bit more thought that I got to put into it in terms of what's causing the muscle fatigue. And one of the great things about the Garmin data you get through is I can clearly identify that now and pinpoint exactly where that fatigue starts to build, and it's much earlier than the magical 20-mile wall. There's something going on a lot earlier than that I need to try and get my head round with stride length and cadence and things that hopefully get me through to that 2:28 I'm looking for.
Fantastic, man. Oh well, listen, I told you we were going to be a certain amount of time on this interview, and you said to me, "There's no way we'll talk that long." And all of a sudden, man, 40 minutes is rolling around. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time. The one last thing to talk about is obviously you are now making the step, as well as going up to race as a pro Ironman this year. You're also professionally stepping up to do some coaching on a professional level. I know you've always coached people at your club. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's one of the things that you got to know when the time is right to do so, and different race experiences, different life experiences prepare you for a moment that you think, I'm now ready. I've got that level of understanding I think is ready to be able to pass on in the right way. And it's not a case of, well, yeah, I'll go and do a course, now I'm a coach. There's a lot of experience through a range of different sports, a lot of emotional experience, and I'm someone who's sort of been through all levels of triathlon really, and understand the challenges that people really have. And it's not just a case of, yeah, I'm an elite athlete, so therefore you do what I do, you'll get good. It's not about that at all. It's about totally understanding what it's like to be in a full-time job and still manage to train for an Ironman, what it's like to be able to manage disappointment in different races, different stresses, different backgrounds that come into racing. So that's something that I couldn't have done 5 years ago, probably couldn't have done a year ago. And the time is right now that I've had significant events that go on in my own life that have just changed my direction to say, now is a time to, perhaps midlife crisis, if you want to call it, but it's a midlife change in direction. That it's a new chapter for me. That I think it's something that I find it's always been a hobby, and it's always something that if you do something as a hobby, you're really passionate about it, you want to do it, and there's a lot of information there that I help people out with. And so yeah, for me it's a totally new career, but something very exciting, and something I've always been, from a teaching background, it's always been my instinct to do, which is help people as much as I can, add value to what they do. And if I can do that for anyone going into triathlon, then even better.
Great stuff. Hey, well, listen, mate, thanks ever so much for taking the time to come on the show and talk to us. We really appreciate it. If anyone else is interested in finding out more about Hywel, you can have a look on his website, which is hyweldavies.me. And we wish you all the best for the future, mate. What's your next race that you've got coming up? You're not sure right now?
I'm not sure right now, but I'm going to start the season with the Ironman out in Israel, which is a iron distance race out in the heat in the desert. So that'll be a focus for January, and that'll complement the London training quite well.
And we'll be able to keep our eye open next season for the races that are happening with you racing pro all across Europe and making the most of that pro card, mate.
Yeah, we'll do.
Great stuff. Listen, thanks again for your time, man. We'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers, Rob. Thank you.
Right, there we are, mate. There's our interview with Hywel. How about that for a character?
Incredible. Put it this way, Rob. So what? I've got 8 years till I'm 40. I've got 8 years to dream and to be like Hywel. That's just in all of it amazing. It's so interesting.
I love the idea that even someone operating at like the very pointy end of a field, winning his age group at Ironmans and finishing in the top 10 as an age group at Ironman UK and things like that, you wouldn't imagine for a second that he struggles with the anxiety and panic attacks and things like that in the swim. and that performances that he's turned out, like the 8:44 at Roth, performances of that standard can still happen after having a panic attack after 5 minutes, where you've turned on your back and floated or held onto a canoe and had to swim to the side of the bank and stuff and get yourself together for a minute or two. And I think that's the real takeaway from that for me, is, that no matter what happens in a race, unless there's a catastrophic equipment failure on the bike, you sit yourself down, you get yourself back together, you press the reset button, and off you go again.
Yeah, that is just super, super impressive, and dealing with that mentally as well.
Yeah.
And as you say, perhaps once you do get into T1 and you're like, right, thank goodness that's over and done with. The race is on now.
I think we underestimate just how much of the performances that we do are actually down to our mental state at the time. A lot of people are very fit on that line, but if you can access those higher levels of mental strength almost, or the ability to sort of reset yourself and get going again, it's amazing. And the thing he talks about, feeling like he was running flat out in the London Marathon, I almost know what he's talking about with that. He sort of says, I've run a 16-minute 5K, and apart from that sprint finish at the end, I probably feel I could probably carry on like that. And I thought to myself, can I relate to that? And I thought, well, maybe I can actually. There's a kind of pace in a 5K where you think, oh, please God, I don't want to have to push myself any harder, just, that final K. But if you got to that point at the 4K point of a 10K, I don't feel like that at the 4K point of a 10K. I feel really relaxed until about 6 or 7K. So maybe I'm not running hard enough. Maybe I should run it as though it's a 5K and just see
what happens.
Just if I can hang on.
Yeah, I just think he's super duper inspiring, basically, Rob.
Yeah.
Everything.
Absolutely.
I think many people would love to have a CV like his, but yeah, still with such a different background as well. I think it shows that so much you can adapt to triathlon, and that lots of former rowers are in the sport.
Yeah, and one of his real key points there is he genuinely has a belief that whatever cardiovascular exercise you're doing, it's all good. The rowing is just as useful to my triathlon as the swimming, the biking, the running is. The lifting weights is similar, but any kind of cardiovascular exercise that you can do is making you better for that race, because our system needs to be operating under stress for a long period of time. And by stopping yourself getting mentally burnt out, just doing the same stuff over and over again, he's managed to add massive longevity to his career, really.
Yeah. And the other person who there are a lot of similarities, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about him shortly, is Dave Clamp, who was our second ever interviewee, wasn't he? And he's currently out
back in episode 2.
Yeah, he's currently out in Mexico doing a Deca Ironman, which, we will talk about. But I know he said before about the importance of the mental strength, and also he wasn't an expert at sport. He was nothing special when he was younger either. And the way that you can keep your body going he goes on about how important physio and sports massage is, doesn't he?
Yeah, very much so. Now then, something we don't talk about in an interview here, but I'm going to tack on to the end here, is Hal talks about moving from teaching and over into coaching. And we've had a good discussion about this, Hywel and I, over the past 6 months. And I'm really happy to announce that Hywel is going to come and he's going to be coaching under the Oxygen Addict banner. So if you've liked what you've heard with Hywel and you're looking for a coach for the next year and you think he's the kind of guy who can help you crack through to the next level, Hywel is going to have his own little page up on our Oxygen Addict website, and he's going to be coaching under our banner for the next year. And I'm really delighted to sort of be able to work with him in some kind of respects at all. And when he first emailed me about January of this year to say he was considering moving careers into full-time coaching, I was just like, I want to be involved with this guy. A bit like with Dave Clamp,
Yep.
I want to be involved with this guy. I want to be around this guy more. I know that the kind of athletes that are attracted to us are going to be attracted to Dave. They're going to be attracted to Hywel. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing more from him. He's going to be doing a bit of writing for the website and putting some of his ideas up there. But he's a great blogger. Does a really good weekly blog, Hywel, to keep up with what's going on with him. So I don't always agree with everything that he writes, and he's pushing the boundaries with some of his ideas, but I think that that's great and is a real sort of visionary in certain areas that I think is going to help a lot of people out. So that's kind of cool.
Love that news. Brilliant news.
Brilliant news, which leads us nicely into Coach's Couch this week, because we've been sent over a question, haven't we, from a chap called Henrik on the TriTalk forum. Henrik, I've not got your surname here. Sorry about this. Have you got the question there, Hels?
Yep.
Do you want to read it out?
He says, so I'm in the midst of thinking about a change of coach and focus on swapping from long-distance triathlon with a bit of TTing and crit racing to doing almost solely TTing and crit racing. So I wondered at the same time that maybe swapping coaches might make sense to add something new and specialist, but I'm overwhelmed by choice, and it made me think, how should one find a new coach? What should people be looking for? And then the other last bit is, does a coach need to have had amazing results themselves to be able to coach?
That's a great question, isn't it? And it's kind of unique, this one, in a way, in that he's looking to move away from triathlon and into a sort of triathlon related activity, with it being time trialing and crit racing. What are your thoughts on this, Hal? What would you be thinking if you were looking to move from being coached by me at triathlon to moving into TTing and crit racing? What would your initial gut feelings be?
I would initially think I want someone who has a solid background in cycling.
Absolutely,
to get me
yeah.
started, essentially.
Yeah.
So it could be a joint approach, but actually I would probably look for someone within cycling who's been really, really successful and pick their brains, because they've clearly been doing it for a number of years. And if they've been successful at it, whatever they're doing is working.
You need to get a feel for the person that you're going to be working with. You need to work out what results they've had coaching athletes like you in the past, regardless of whether they've got a qualification or not. I think whether they're a good athlete themselves is a lot less important than whether they've can show you success working with athletes that are the kind of athlete you are. So if you are, I don't know, an overweight 50-year-old man and you're drawn to a guy because he's just gone 8:30 an Ironman, that person might not have the skills and experience to coach you with the particular challenges that you've got. If you are, in your position, Hels, if you're a young lady,
Yep.
You've got particular challenges in coaching that needs addressing in a way that if you've got a very strong male time trialist background coach and they gave you the sort of sessions that they themselves do, well, there's a very good chance you're going to get knee injuries very quickly, because a very thin lady from a sort of running background just doesn't have that specific knee ligament strength yet to be able to push big gears all the time on the bike. And a classic time trialist session of, go and do some really big gear work, if you get that in season one, it's going to blow you to absolute pieces. So I think people have got to be extremely careful when they're looking at the fact that a good athlete has decided they're going to do coaching, and work out whether that person's got experience of helping people like them. And again, you can look at guys like, Brett Sutton is lauded as one of the most successful and respected coaches in the sport of triathlon. Never an amazing athlete himself, and in fact came from a background training horses,
yeah.
didn't he, originally? Yeah. But he's got that ability to coach people. Now, nobody goes and says, well, Brett Sutton was never a very good time trialist, so I don't think he can get me to a good level of fitness.
And what would you say about, just carrying on from Henrik's sort of question then, do you think is it worth almost having so if you are wanting to switch into cycling, perhaps not having a cycling coach then, but having like a team of people that you can pick their brains, but have one coach to look after you, or quite what?
Well,
You need to be able to pick someone's brains about the
there's a
finer details of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think if you were just going into time trialing, then probably a good triathlon coach with a good knowledge of conditioning athletes will do a very good job of conditioning you for time trialing. And there'll be some specific information you can pick up from very good time trialists. And especially that, if you go into the time trialing forum, the aero weeniness of it all that they get into about hand position and head position and helmets and things, that's the kind of skill side of it almost, that you can pick up a lot of knowledge from reading there. If he's looking at going into crit racing, we're going through a whole other door. We're going into, you need the skills of being able to ride in a pack in close proximity, stay out of the wind, corner at extremely high speed. Have you got the bottle for riding at 45k an hour into blind corners? You very quickly find out whether you've got that, and how you actually teach people to do it. That's a difficult question, isn't it? Imagine, from a coach's point of view, setting up practices for your athletes. Imagine the liability aspect of this. We're going to go herring into this corner at 45k an hour, because at some point you need to learn how to do that. That is a bit like that coach Andy Kirkland from British Cycling, who we had on the British Triathlon course. He was talking about the young kids he has need to learn how to ride at 60 kilometers an hour behind a car. And so that's one of the things they have to do in training, ride at 60k an hour behind a car, because it's a skill involved in bunch racing. If they can't do it, they're never going to be able to do it. But at the same time, you enter this hideous world of liability and whose fault is it if a 17-year-old has a crash. And so, yeah, I'd say with criterium racing, there's definitely, you need to go and seek out a source of knowledge. Now, whether that is somebody who is a coach or whether that is somebody who has raced at a very high level and can coach you on the skills of that, then, there's definitely knowledge to be mined there. We don't have this problem in triathlon, do we? We just ride in a straight line and try not to fall off too much.
Well, hopefully that'll help, Henrik.
I'm not sure it will.
Well, it gets you thinking, doesn't it? About what you want from a coach.
Yeah, ask around, I think. Go to the local crits, ask around. How did you get into it? Who's helped you out? Who's a good coach? I think you'll probably find that within the road racing community, there's a lot of people help each other out and help with little tips and things like that as well.
Definitely. Well, if you have a question for Coach's Couch, then just get in touch with us. You can get in touch with us via the oxygenaddict.com website.
Absolutely. Right, Hells, we're going to move on to the news section. We've hidden it away till last for this week, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Well, can we start in Mexico?
Absolutely we can.
Right, so as we just mentioned it a few minutes ago, the DECA Ironman Championships are currently taking place. They started on Monday. And so the DECA Ironman this year is an Ironman a day for 10 days. Sometimes they do that you swim, like 38 kilometers, and then you would ride 1,080 800 kilometers, and then you would run essentially 10 marathons, one after the other. So this year,
let's get this right. Hang on, 38 kilometers of swimming in one go.
Yeah.
So pretty much the distance of a marathon.
Yeah.
And then cycling.
Kind of.
What's that, like 1,100 miles? So that's further than Lanzanchano Groats, isn't it? By 300 or 400 miles.
Yep.
So 1.5 times that, and then we're running 262 miles.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh my good grief.
Yeah, but this year it's different. This year it's the same,
but
easy. Split it into 10. So it is an Ironman a day for 10 days, and really the sooner you finish, the more recovery you have before the next day.
Wow.
And
this is all taking place as well. It's at altitude, isn't it? Because Dave's big problem last year, if you remember, was he had altitude sickness for 5 days.
Yeah. So it's at altitude. It's pretty hot. It's in a city called León in Mexico. And I think one of the hardest bits, not just the distances to get your head around, the fact is these things take place in like a park, basically. So it will be a 1 or 2 mile circuit, I'm pretty sure, for the bike.
Yeah.
And then you will run around that same course, because clearly you can't have 10 Ironmans for 10 days taking over a city, can you? So they have to really, really hone down, and the actual race zone is pretty tiny. So if you like going around in circles for 10 days solid, get it on your list. So Dave Clamp is Britain's only male competitor. And then Claire, who runs the Brutal events, there's a little clue in the name there. She is on the start list as well for the women. So there are 2 women racing. She's one, and then there's an American lady as well. So that's amazing.
So wow. So finishing is at least a silver medal with that one, hey?
Totally. So
I can't. We'll have Dave back on. We'll have him back on to talk about this when he gets back, because he is one of the world's nicest guys, as well as being one of the most inspirational as well.
because he's 50-something.
Awesome.
We should point this out. He is 50-something, isn't he?
He's 56 this year.
Yep. So there we go.
And he won his age group at Ironman UK last year, didn't he? So he'll be 56 this year. And honestly, he's built like a 30-year-old, isn't he, that man?
And he didn't do Coda this year,
for...
did he? So he might have actually tapered a little bit better.
Only Dave can use Kona as a taper for the Deca Ironman, can't he?
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. And like you said, started on Monday at 2:00, so we haven't even got the results of day 1 yet. So get yourselves over. Is there a Facebook page for it, Hells? We can follow along.
I haven't seen it on.
What's the website address for the Deca Ironman then?
Oh, now you're asking questions. Again, give me a moment and I'll tell you.
Okay, good stuff. I will blather on in the background. Next piece of information, 29th of May next year, we're going to have a new UK event, the Poseidon Sprint and Olympic events, run by F2 Events, which is Mark Livesey and Caroline Livesey. They've sent us, sent it out on Twitter actually. It's in Dacre Lakeside Park in Driffield, East Yorkshire. Beautiful part of the country. These guys are renowned for putting on really good events for athletes. You know, Mark is a great athlete himself. Caroline's obviously a great athlete herself. They think about all the details, like getting really good matting down on the floor to stop you hurting your feet running between the lake and getting to transition. And Mark tells me that the Poseidon is going to be a real jewel in the crown of a sort of Olympic distance event to rival his Rubicon event that happens at the end of August. So as we speak, I think that entrance will now be open. So if you want to go over to F2 Events and check out the Poseidon Sprint and Olympic for next year, I think you can get yourself an early bird entry discount there as well at the moment. If you're quick, certainly you can if you're with a tri club and you've got a group if you want to enter together. So good news there.
Fantastic.
How have we done, Hells?
Yeah,
we found the website?
I found it. So
you are good.
It is decaultratri.co.n for nurse, F for Freddy. decaultratri.co.nf.
NF,
Yeah.
there we go.
And
cool.
they say you can like them on Facebook, so they must be doing updates.
Find Dave Clamp on Facebook, all of you, and friend him so you can follow along.
Because I think his daughter is doing updates.
She is, the lovely Harriet.
Yep.
Getting updates there. Now, back to UK shores again, Hells. We've got a new Ironman distance race in the New Forest next year, the Gladiator.
I love all these names. We've got the Poseidon, now we've got the Gladiator.
Yeah, it's a good name, that, hey. In the New Forest, run by the same team who used to do Forest Man. It's a very similar course to what Forest Man used to be, with a slightly less brutal run, and apparently 7 laps or 7 trips through the village on the run. So that's going to be
good support.
It was renowned as being, if you remember my friend TC, Anthony Garandini, who's done loads of these crazy events as well, like Deca Dave has done. He's the guy who did 100 Ironmen recently.
Stuff your 10, Dave. Get on 100.
Yeah, he did do 10 in one go, though. he's rated the New Forest Man event as the best Ironman that he's ever done, and this is a guy who's done 100 of them, so they're doing something right. That's going to be on the 26th of June next year, which I believe is the same date as Triathlon X, and also the Lakesman Tri, I think, is the next day. So a busy weekend. That'll be the longest day weekend, won't it, around there?
Yeah.
Popular time for events. And just one more piece of news, Hells. Do you want to break this one? Shall we be the people who break this news and go out on a limb and say that we're going to call it, or do you think it's still to be announced?
Okay, so I know that there's going to be another Ironman 70.3 UK next year. So they've already got Staffordshire, they've got Wimbledon, and they have announced that there's going to be a third 70.3. So do you have more news on that one, Rob?
I do have more news on this one, Hells, because the date has been announced due to some very clever digging in one of the Facebook groups. Ironman put up a job advert earlier today advertising for some kind of management job, and within that it listed the 5 events that were going to be held next year, and the date of the this mystery 70.3 UK was announced. Now, interestingly, the date of this event is the same date as tryweymouth.com, okay?
Yep.
Which is the 11th of September. So with a little bit of super sleuthing, I've decided that this means following Challenge Weymouth parting ways with Challenge. It's got to be, hasn't it? Sure.
That is exactly. That's what I thought. Yep, because the
Try Weymouth page says announcement soon.
Yep.
Weymouth on the 11th of September. Watch out for an announcement. It's got to be.
So we're putting 2 and 2 together.
70.3.
Yep.
Yeah,
no, I'm absolutely with you, because
iconic venue.
When it was announced that so the company that had been running Challenge Weymouth were no longer going to be doing it, and that Ironman UK were going to be announcing a new race, well then you're like, okay, it has been done in other countries where Ironman have come in on a challenge race, and thinking about it, when else would they be able to do a 70.3?
Yeah, I'm a bit gutted because my heart of hearts, I was hoping it was going to be in North Wales. I was really hoping it was going to be 70.3 Llandudno, because I think that would be the most awesome event, like venue for a branded 70.3.
Yeah.
So maybe Challenge needs to get in there and buy up an event in Llandudno. Strike back while the iron's hot. So we're calling it. You heard it first here, kids. This is not official. This is just our gut feeling saying that 70.3 UK third event is going to be. It's definitely going to be the 11th of September.
Well, yeah, I've got the job description up now, and it says core duties and responsibilities. Ironman 70.3 Staffordshire, 12th of June. Ironman UK 70.3, 26th of June. Ironman UK 17th of July. Ironman 70.3 Dublin, 14th of August. Ironman 70.3 11th of September. And then Ironman Wales 18th of September.
There you go. So it remains to be seen, doesn't it? Do we have we got the call right? If we have, you've got to buy Helen a pint next time you see a race, listeners. All right. Do you know what, Hells? We have witted on this evening, haven't we?
Yeah. Now I was going to say one more thing to wit on.
Go on then.
Right. You know, last week I gave a little recipe for some energy bars.
Oh yeah, this has been a big hit, hasn't it?
People got some good feedback from the energy bars, which were so simple. So I'm going to give another very simple recipe, and I mean simple, right? This one is more of a breakfast recipe, and it involves oats, raisins, nuts, Greek yogurt, and frozen berries. You want to get an old ice cream tub. You can make enough for a couple of days. In your ice cream tub, you want to put about half full of oats with raisins and nuts, so a decent handful of both raisins, both nuts. Then I want you to put about, we're gonna put liquid in up to about the level of the oats, okay? A quarter of that liquid, put in some apple juice. The rest of it, put water. So you don't want it really sloppy, but you just want enough water so that it's sort of level with the oats. Then we're going to throw in some,
I see where you're going with
yeah,
this.
0% Greek yogurt. Chuck that in. Chuck in your frozen berries. Stir it up. Whack it in the fridge. Leave it overnight. And then the following morning, you should be able to enjoy it. If it's too dry, then add a little bit of milk, or add a bit more yogurt. It's called Bircher muesli. It's a Swiss thing. Bircher. Bircher muesli, as we might say in the UK.
Bircher. As you say up north.
But check it out, and you can always reduce some of the recipes you probably find have got grated apple in and lots of apple juice, but you can reduce the sugar content by swapping the apple juice for water. There you go.
Nice. Second of our cup of try recipes, and we're headed towards an ebook here, Hells. It's coming. I'm going to throw in one of my new veggie recipes next week. It'll be great.
Fantastic.
All right, we're going to wrap up the show. Thanks very much for listening. Next week we should be back again. I'm going to try and line up a few more exciting interviews for you, non-confirmed as yet. If you've got anyone you'd like to hear on the show, tweet us at Cup of Try. And especially if you've got anyone's contact details and you think to make a good interview for the show, please get in touch. Helen, it's been great talking to you. Thanks very much, my friend.
Pleasure.
I will see you soon. And until next week, look after yourselves, especially if you're commuting in the dark. I am Coach Rob Wilby.
And I'm Helen Murray.
And you've been listening to the Cup of Triathlon podcast. Till next week, see you then.